4 new Vault Hunters are set to make their mark on Kairos in Borderlands 4, and after a frame-by-frame analysis, I've uncovered some fascinating details about them. I'm MentalMars, and let's deep dive everything we know about the assassin. So, this first Vault Hunter is wearing a mechanical exoskeleton, which is going to enhance his abilities. And if I were him, I would also be wearing one, because with all those mechanical psychos out there, which we have seen in the reveal trailers, you're going to need every advantage you can get to overpower them. Initially, I wasn't that excited about this character, as we saw him perform this jump attack while wielding 2 energy blades. Therefore, I thought he was going to be a melee character, and it's just not for me, as this playstyle doesn't work for me in a gun game. However, after Gearbox Software showcased the release date trailer, things changed. But before I'm going to talk about that, let's discuss those energy blades. The jump attack seems like an action skill similar to what we have seen in Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, where the Berserker can perform a leaping attack. However, the Borderlands 4 assassin performs this agile move with more grace. And while it looks cool and all, I think there is more to it. Because the press releases by 2K Games talked about this free-form combat. And if you watch the Borderlands 3 behind the scenes content, you might remember that Gearbox Software was experimenting with an action skill for Amara that allowed her to chain multiple melee attacks, enabling you to create your own combos. What if this is one of those ideas that they are bringing back? Because remember, during the Borderlands 4 developer presentation, they said they were putting things back on the board again that didn't make it into Borderlands 3.
And we start putting things on the board.
And putting things back on the board. Our ambition is always greater than our time allowed. And so as much as it's about continuing Borderlands as it exists, there's lots of things that don't make it. And we kind of want to throw those back on the boards to kind of re-examine like that idea that we didn't have time for. How could we bring that to the forefront and actually invest in it? So we've got some great stuff that we've thought about for years at this point that we're actually executing this time around and now having the ability to actually do them right.
What if the assassin could swiftly jump from one enemy to another and fluidly attack them with his energy blades? Well, wouldn't that be a major upgrade to the leaping slam attack? And while we're talking about the energy blades, we have seen enemies with different colored energy blades, which I suspect isn't an aesthetic thing, but they actually deal different elemental damage types. It would be interesting if the assassin could also attune his blades to the various elemental damage types. And talking about upgrades, in the release date trailer, the assassin got upgraded to a Gunzerker, as we see him deconstruct a second weapon in his hand. It's currently unknown if we can use any weapon or if it's a specific weapon. It wouldn't surprise me if the blaster works similar to Zane's Mantis cannon from Borderlands 3. However, you can use the extra weapon for a limited time instead of having multiple charges, and each shot has a cooldown. Gearbox moving to a specific weapon might allow them to control the damage, before we get ourselves another character with crazy gun merging abilities. I'm looking at you, Salvador. We have seen the assassin guy deconstruct an additional weapon and handle Tedior weapons in the release date trailer. Therefore, I have seen folks point out that he might be a Tedior soldier. But I'm not getting that aesthetic if you compare him with the Tedior soldiers in New Tales from the Borderlands. Then Joltstooth made a video saying this character might have an ability that allows him to double the number of projectiles. And while it's an interesting theory and not uncommon for a character to add additional projectiles, I think a few of his evidence points don't show the assassin dude performing those actions. The multiple projectiles coming from the rocket launcher are actually being shot by the Brute Vault Hunter, as you can see his knee at the beginning of the scene. Then I think the Brute is also the one shooting the multiple projectiles and causing the double grenade explosions here, as this part of this arm is most likely his, as the assassin dude would show more of his human arm while holding a gun like that. I do think this Vault Hunter is going to be the character where speed kills. Kinda what Zane did with Borderlands 3, but with a whole different arsenal of gadgets that empowers us to do cool stuff. Now let's deep dive everything we know about the Siren. This second Vault Hunter is the Mage class, and her purple tattoos has wild fan theories hitting the internet faster than a flight of Infinity gun. It's been speculated that she is a fake Siren, and she needs those canisters on her arm to mimic the Siren powers, because her tattoos aren't always present in the trailers. Fans also suggested that she holds the powers of Commandant Steel from the first Borderlands game, as we never saw those in action. And that would make sense, as there are only a limited number of Sirens in the Borderlands universe, but that would also put the Phase Leech abilities from Tyreen in Borderlands 3 back on the table. However, what do we actually know about the Borderlands 4 Siren? Well, she is the most anticipated Vault Hunter amongst fans, but she's also the character with the least amount of screen time in all of the trailers to date. That said, we did see two of her abilities in action in the release date trailer. One of them definitely sets the tone, as we see her summon a Siren Grim Reaper with a giant scythe. This deadly spirit gave me some Death Trap vibes from Gage in Borderlands 2. I can already see the Phase Reaper target nearby enemies and slash them with that scythe. And I expect that Gearbox will add more mechanics to this ability as they did with Death Trap, but also put a new twist to it, as they are looking for ways to create fresh gameplay experiences. Another ability we see the Siren perform is this deadly purple orb that obliterates the opponent. At first glance, this ability looks like a simple fire and forget skill. However, the visual effects at the bottom of the screen suggest that there is more to this ability, and there is a lingering effect. Can we throw these orbs for the remaining of the duration? Or is there a temporary status effect in place? For example, providing damage buffs and lifesteal while sacrificing a percentage of your health per second, and thereby creating a risk and reward gameplay loop. I think the Siren in Borderlands 4 is going to be an interesting and deadly character. Sirens have always been powerful, but I think we'll be seeing a more darker version this time around. Now let's deep dive everything we know about the Brute. This third playable Vault Hunter is packing a six-pack and is ready to punch his way through Kairos with his mechanical arm. He is commonly characterized as a berserker class, and his warrior-like appearance gives me Viking vibes, which is reinforced by the dual axes we see him wield throughout the trailers. But Vikings were also skilled craftsmen, which is where the drones could come into play. Because if we take a closer look at those two elemental axes, they are actually innovatively assembled by these drones. And in case you didn't notice, he keeps those devices stored on his back, as you can see here. Initially, I assumed this Vault Hunter would be a mixture of Brick from Borderlands 1, Creek from Borderlands 2 and the Berserker from Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. The two axes even gave me that Buzzsaw Rampage vibe from Creek, where he can melee or throw them at enemies. But Gearbox Software isn't here to create the same character all over again, so there is going to be a twist. One of the Brute's elemental axes appears to be charged with the Incendiary element, while the other one contains the Cryo element. And we could see these two elements take a prominent place in the Brute skill tree and play off each other. Frozen enemies have always taken extra damage from melee attacks ever since Borderlands the pre-sequel. However, what if the Brute can cause a thermal shock and shatter frozen enemies by dealing incendiary damage to them? New synergies like these could shake up the way how we play and diversify builds. There's also another ability shown in the release date trailer where the drones come into action. Here we see the drones take place around the left arm and empower this jet thrusted dash punch. And again, I think there is more at play here than a simple dash because of the visual effects that linger on the screen. Because if you look at the top and bottom of the screen, you can see these flames. Therefore, I think this could be an enrage ability, where the brute might receive additional boost like a reduction on damage taken and an increase on close range damage. This could tie into dealing increased damage to frozen enemies as previously mentioned. And then there is this interesting detail I think most people have missed, including myself, and I've watched these trailers a bunch of times. I recently discovered this hidden detail. I think we can augment the brute's mechanical arm, because if we compare the arm in this shot where he does the superhero landing with the next shot where he's wielding the weapon, you can see that there is an additional exhaust pipe on his arm in the second shot. This discovery made me excited about the potential and wanting to learn more about the new playable Vault Hunters in Borderlands 4. What if the brute has a hardpoint slot like most from Borderlands 3, where you can equip various weapons in, but this time around they act as melee overrides. As we have seen the brute perform his action skills with this extension present. The exhaust pipe we see could function as his personal flamethrower, which would then complement his skill tree if it's indeed centered around the fire and cryo elements, like we saw with the 2 elemental axes. Then again, this exhaust pipe could also just be the character's class mod, but those have always been displayed on the character's hip in previous games. The brute is currently the most visual appealing character to me, and I usually don't gravitate to melee characters in a Borderlands game, but those drones have me intrigued. I kinda want to do all those cool moves from the knock in Borderlands 3, where you can create a shield with them or ride them like a hoverboard. Now let's deep dive everything we know about the Maliwan mechanic. This 4th Vault Hunter is giving out mechanic vibes, and her designs show similarities to the Borderlands 3 concept art depicting a Maliwan heavy combined with the tubes from a Maliwan trooper. It wouldn't be odd that one of the playable Vault Hunters is associated with one of the weapon manufacturers, as Roland from Borderlands 1 was Atlas, Axton from Borderlands 2 was Dahl, and Mose from Borderlands 3 was Vladov. Having a Maliwan associated character could let her double down on the manufacture traits and make her the Elementist, as Maliwan specializes in dealing elemental damage. That said, our 4th playable character hasn't revealed a lot about herself. While we have seen the other Vault Hunters perform 2 notable abilities, this Vault Hunter currently only has showcased 1 action skill. But it's also the most insane ability we have seen. Because in the release date trailer we saw her destruct this giant cannon that charges up this destructive disco ball, which we then see pass through an enemy and detonate this nuclear explosion. I do wonder how effective the damage will be when the disco ball passes through an enemy compared to the giant explosion. Or is there a way that we can trigger the explosion, because I just might be shooting that disco ball at the ground to create the desired effect. The colors we have seen during the disco ball scene are more reminiscent of the various rarity colors rather than the various colors of the elemental damage types. Therefore, I think it's just there for the spectacle, to provide an empowering moment for us players. Then there is this interesting detail I recently discovered. If we compare the left hand glove from this shot to this one, I noticed that the second one has additional tubes and a blaster of some kind. But it is interesting, I noticed this on 2 of the 4 playable Vault Hunters. The lash you use to grapple seems to originate from the back of the hand and not the forearm. And when we see the assassin dude perform a grapple, there isn't an additional mechanical device on his arm. So I'm curious to find out what we'll be using this for. We still need to learn a lot about our Molly 1 mechanic, but let me know what you think about her in the comments, and if you have any idea what this device on her glove can be used for, let me know. I would really appreciate it if you subscribed to my YouTube channel and bookmarked my site MentalMars.com, because I'm creating the Borderlands 4 resources you want leading up to the game's release and update them throughout the game's life cycle. Thank you and enjoy.